Craziest.
All right, let's call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to Sunnyside City Council's agenda for Monday, June 6, 2022. Before we start the roll call, I'd like to mention that Deputy Mayor Rasucci has asked for an excused absence. If there's no objections, none, he is excused. And Councilor Hart contacted me and said that she will be here, but she is late. Got another meeting that's going on at the same time, so. With that information, I'd like to ask City Clerk to go ahead and go down the roll call, please.
Mayor Burisma.
I'm here.
Councilor Beeler. Councilor Farmer.
Here.
Councilor Ripley. Here. Councilor Hicks.
Here.
City Manager Alba. Here. City Clerk Anthony, I am here. Finance and Administrative Services Director Warner. Here. Fire Chief Anderson.
Here.
Police Chief Estrada.
I'm here.
Public Works Director Fisher.
I'm here.
I looked back at my emails. Mayor and Councilor Beeler is in town,
Okay.
so maybe this is running late.
Okay, well, we'll give them a chance. Thank you. Item 1 on our agenda, Enterprise Fleet Analysis. Receive a presentation from Joe Hatcher with Enterprise Fleet. That's presented here.
Thank you. So this has been vetted by our leadership team, and I'm just going to let Joe take it over, and he's going to run the PowerPoint. So you're up, Joe.
And Joe, before you start, I'd just like to announce for the record that Councilor Beeler has arrived.
I'm sorry, say that again. I apologize.
That's all right. I was just announcing that another council member has arrived for our meeting, so you're free to begin.
Got it. Well, yeah, I appreciate everyone having me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of walking you through what we put together for you guys. Please, at any point, feel free to stop me and ask questions. We don't need to hold them to the end. The whole point is to give everyone in the room today a really clear understanding of what we do for some of the other cities in Washington, and to that end, asking questions is pretty effective. And can everyone hear me all right?
I think we can.
So, okay, screen share come through okay?
Yes.
Yes, the screens are good.
Awesome. So most people are familiar with what Enterprise does on the rent-a-car side. We have ads, people travel, right? That's a pretty well-known part of our business. What a lot of folks don't realize, including myself 9 years ago, is that means that we run the biggest private fleet in the world. And the infrastructure that it takes to do that, we have at our fingertips. You know, and with that comes the expertise and the economies of scale that allows us to manage our own fleet really effectively. A couple of decades ago, we realized that was of tremendous value to private companies, municipalities, and government entities to be able to tap into the same things we use to run our own fleet. Is that everything you guys have to do, from figuring out what vehicle to buy, when to buy it, how long to keep it in fleet, maintain it, fuel it, insure it. We have to do all of that as well. So everything that we do, it is a la carte, right? If it's not a good fit, then that's fine. Ain't broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, we've gotten pretty good at managing a fleet and doing it 65 years now. So here's some folks around Washington, and then I kind of pulled some in from the rest of the country as well. Even threw a Apollo in there, pretty big on the commercial side, not too far from you guys. Obviously, you guys have this. If you would like contact info for any of your counterparts, any of these entities, I'd encourage you to reach out. No one can speak to what it's like to work with us more than people that do indeed work with us. So kind of to my point earlier, right? This is everything that goes into running a fleet. I can go too far into a lot of these details, and unless you guys would like to, in which case I'm happy to elaborate. But and then really quick from a due diligence standpoint, I believe I heard mention of this a little bit ago. We were vetted by Sourcewell and awarded the contract. We just won another extension. Their city of Sunnyside is currently a member, number 92679. So when you think of managing a fleet vehicle, and this is true for dump trucks, police cars, sedans, pickups, vans, right? The same concept is going to apply. Everyone knows when you buy a brand new vehicle and drive it off the lot, it's going to lose value more quickly in the beginning than it will when it's 10 or 15 years old. Eventually, it's pretty much lost most of the value, and running it another year isn't really going to degrade the value much. By the time it's worth $2,000, not a lot there left to lose. Fuel will start out as cheap as it's going to be, unless, of course, it's June of 2022. But by and large, fuel expenses will be as low as they're going to be when the vehicle's brand new. Over time, the cost of gas will go up, which we're all painfully aware of as of late. And by the time the vehicle's 10 or 20 years old, it's probably lost a couple miles per gallon. And not really shown up here, but keep in mind that every year we make pretty good strides in fuel economy as well. And maintenance starts out as cheap as it's going to be. Really just oil changes first year or two. And then at a certain point in time, it takes some serious money to keep the vehicle on the road. There's really nothing stopping you from running vehicles to 1 million miles as long as you don't wreck it before that point. It just becomes a question of how much is it worth throwing money at it to keep it on the road. Something we figured out for our own fleet is that every vehicle that's ever been in existence has a point where just the simple math, it's just cheaper to replace it than it is to continue to operate it. It's going to be different for every vehicle based on the outfitting costs and the resale market for that vehicle, how strong the government buy is via the state contract. I'll share some examples here, but an F-350 or 450 with a big expensive service body, it's going to be pretty far to the right. A half-ton pickup truck with minimal aftermarket is counterintuitively far to the left. To the extent that you can sell vehicles at a profit after a year or two of running them. Give you an example. Earlier this year, I suppose in the last year, we sold the city of Spokane's pickups that they had acquired in 2019 for $12,000 more than they paid for them 2 years after operating them. We all know they're going to continue to run for a lot longer than 20,000 miles on them. But how long the vehicle's going to run and when we should replace it aren't necessarily the same question. So the role that we play for most of our government clients, we have some operational stuff like maintenance and fuel we can help with. But that might be an ain't broke, don't fix it portion of how you guys do things today. It's really running the analysis every single year on every single vehicle in the fleet and really putting the exact quantified math behind when to replace every vehicle in the fleet. As a general rule of thumb, it's when the vehicle is still worth pretty good money and before you start to spend a lot of money on maintenance. There's plenty of exceptions, but by and large, that's true. So I'll give you an example of this. This is a 2021 typical government truck that a lot of our clients run and we regularly recommend. Last year, I know vehicle market has been absurd, and I'll touch on that here in a little bit. Last year, If any of us as individual consumers went to a dealership, we could expect to pay 34/7 for that vehicle. The city of Sunnyside will pay 27/8 for the same vehicle. GM mandates that you run that vehicle at least 6 months in order for them to honor the rebate that they've given you for the discount. They don't want you running the state's biggest used car dealership. That's not why they give you the discount. 6 months later, vehicle's worth quite a bit more than we paid for it. There are some logistical challenges with replacing vehicles that frequently. So it's maybe not the right move, but even after a year, there's still a profit to be made selling that vehicle 1 year old with 5,000 or 10,000 miles on it. This isn't taking into account the spike in the resale market due to COVID, which is how we sell vehicles for Spokane for 12 grand more than they paid for them each. That's just gravy on top, right? Even in the normal market, short cycling some of the half ton or light duty pickups is still an incredibly effective way to do it. We can even use that to offset running police vehicles less time, right? Because the cost of running a police vehicle with the upfitting and the higher mileage and the relatively poor resale market and take away our opportunity with that vehicle segment to turn a profit on them. But if we can quantify for the city what it'll cost to run police vehicles 3 years and 5 and 8 and 9 and equip you with the information we need to make the right decision for the city, then that's the role that we'll play there. Any questions so far?
Council, any questions? Looks like there are none. Continue.
So this is all well and good, keeping vehicles less time, lowering costs. Also helps make pretty good impacts in fuel economy and thus our carbon footprint and comply with some of the things Inslee has put out there for us. But it ties up a lot of capital. And if we were to, let's say, go start keeping vehicles 1 or 2 years, that would be a tremendous outlay. And we'd sell them at the end of that, and long term it would be very cost effective, but it would take a prohibitive amount of capital at the beginning. So the way that most of our government clients choose to pay for their vehicles is through a municipal lease or an open-end lease or an equity lease. This has nothing to do with a dealership lease or a net lease or a closed-end lease. They're all the same thing. That's what we would get as consumers walking into a dealership leasing a car, right? But with that comes mileage limitations and penalties if you go over, wear and tear penalties, and you get absolutely zero resale back from that vehicle. It's really a terrible deal for 99% applications. An equity lease is simply financing the vehicle down to a residual balance that's greater than zero. It also means that there are no mileage restrictions, penalties, wear and tear penalties, limits on upfitting. And most importantly, from a financial side, the equity or the difference between the balance owed and the resale value is property of the city. So if we took, let's say we took the same vehicle, right? You guys buy it for $27,800, and we plan to sell it in a year, and we know it's worth $31,000 conservatively. Well, we might just finance that vehicle from 27 down to 22. We're still making payments on it, but we're not at the mercy of whatever parameters the dealership put on it. It's the city's vehicle to do it as you will. At the end of that term, if we paid it down to 22 and sold it for 31, the city would have $9,000 coming back to them. Whereas in the past, most entities will choose to roll that money into the general fund, thus kind of taking away the incentive for department to replace the vehicle more quickly. What most folks choose to do is take that $9,000 and roll it into the replacement vehicle, keeping the money within each department or each budget, however we do that. And that means we're starting off with a pretty nice chunk of money the next time. And the next one will be cheaper, and then we start clicking with gas once we get into the second and third vehicles. This is just some simple math to give you an example of buying a vehicle for $30,000, paying it down to 10, right? And if we do get to the end of a lease term, whether it's 12 or 60 months or wherever we put that, we don't have to replace it. If the math shows it's cheaper to continue to run it, then by all means, we can keep making payments on the balance of the term. We can just write a check for it and just own it outright. Or if it does make sense to replace it, Enterprise would send a driver out, we pick that vehicle up, and we take it to either Spokane or Tequila, where we run our resale lots. Share a little trade secret about resale. Enterprise makes most of their money selling our rental cars after we rent them for a while. Last year, we made 2/3 of our income from resale of our rental vehicles. We're just renting vehicles to cover costs in the meantime. We're basically an elaborate scheme to sell used vehicles. And so that, because we own our own lots, we employ our own people whose entire job it is to sell vehicles for maximum amount of money. It equips us with really powerful information, which is what we use in our analysis and forecasting for all this, the budgeting. And we'll also outsell most auctions, especially public auctions, by at least 13-14%. A typical year, 20 or 30 for the last year or so, but that's probably not the most accurate measuring stick, just with how chaotic the resale market's been. So here's the resale market from a couple ways to look at it. On the right is a 26-year look back, 27-year look on the resale market. You can see every spring, the resale market will come up, will stay strong through summer, and it'll drop off through fall. You can see 2009, when pretty major drop in used vehicle sales. You can also see over on the right, the beginning of COVID, first couple of months, followed by an incredibly tight vehicle shortage that led to just astronomically high resale values. Over on the left is year over year, 2014, 17, 18, 19, pretty typical. They come up in the spring, stay strong through the summer, drop off in the fall. Here's that first year of COVID. 2021 even outpaced 2020. It's unbelievable what we can sell vehicles for, and that's all driven by the vehicle shortage from the manufacturers. Vehicles are hard to get. The supply has not even come close to meeting the demand. Which is not a great place to be when we don't have time to wait for a vehicle. But all of this is actually a silver lining for the folks that are proactive, and we order vehicles ahead of time before a vehicle fails. Our costs aren't really going to change that much, except we're going to get more money when we sell those vehicles. So for our clients who plan really well, fleet costs have gone down tremendously, whereas the rest of the world is having to fight the brunt and kind of take it on the chin and outbid people for vehicles. So the cost of not having a plan has gone up, but the cost of having a plan has gotten quite a bit better. Just a couple of notes on our resale market. So a little over 1 million vehicles a year from either our own vehicles or our clients' fleet vehicles. Couple notes on safety. There's a couple key years here I want to point out. So model year 2007, anti-lock brakes and airbags became standard. Every vehicle in the US that's 2007 or newer has those features. Not that we didn't have them before, but they would have needed to be special ordered, and you'd have to make sure that those vehicles have them. 2012, same thing for electronic stability control, is that little icon that flashes on your dash, the hydroplane. That's your vehicle understanding that it's not oriented perfectly straight and correcting itself. So hit a patch of ice, hydroplane, hit a patch of snow, all that. Electronic stability control made a 50% reduction in fatalities. That's especially single car accidents. Think of driving alone on a highway, that's what's going to save you. There's quite a few vehicles in the city's fleet today. Obviously, they're a little bit older than that. And as we go forward, things like Bluetooth and backup cameras, every year we get more and more features that are standardized, and we have more we can choose to add on as well. Maintenance, again, this is an a la carte service, but we don't do our own maintenance. We have rental cars in like every major market and most cities in the US. But we rely on our local tax base to provide that service. So new vehicles, we can actually fix and guarantee it because we have enough of a sample size to look at each vehicle and make a reasonable guess what it'll cost to maintain for X number of months or X number of miles. We even have some shops here in Sunnyside. Of course, if you guys do use any shops that are in our program, we can probably add those. Or if you want to continue doing maintenance as you do it today, then there'd be absolutely zero change to that. Again, if it didn't grow, don't fix it. So here's the fleet today. See, we have it broken down by vehicle type on the left. We have a schedule that I'll walk through replacing them there in that middle top box. And across the bottom, you can see how it falls from a model year breakdown. Obviously, about 15 years ago, went pretty heavy and purchased quite a few vehicles in all the same amount of time. And those are going to start sunsetting here in the next handful of years. So the plan we have put together here in a second is address getting those replaced without avoiding a large capital outlay. And kind of getting our way back on top of things in front of the 8 ball. So here's the nuts and bolts of the budget that we recommend. So a couple assumptions across the top. We got 58 vehicles in the fleet. You guys are currently on about a 14.5-year cycle. 22 cents a mile is what we use for our maintenance figure. That's a national average from a few hundred municipalities. And 8,700 miles, the police cars are going more, right? And then most of the light duty vehicles are going substantially less. We didn't make any adjustments into the vehicle count. We might be able, if vehicles are a bit newer, might not need a spare too, but we assumed everything would be flat there. Maintenance should be $50 and 12 cents, and we assume $3.75 a gallon. We might need to adjust that based on the last few months, but we'll see how that shakes out. This orange bar across the top, the way things are done today, this is a typical year for the city across a long-term average. I know we don't buy 4 vehicles a year, but to keep on a 15-year cycle, you need to buy 4 vehicles a year. Those 4 vehicles, based on an aggregate vehicle type, will cost $150,386 an average year. At 22 cents a mile, maintenance will cost $111,360. Fuel will be at $157,688. That's at 12 miles a gallon, $3.75 per gallon. So a total budget of just under $420,000, just to keep the status quo, keep the fleet moving along. We recommend replacing 11 of the vehicles in the first year, which would leave you with 47 that you own today and will continue to retain and operate. And 11 that would be leased via an equity lease through enterprise. Total budget for those vehicles, 76 for the lease budget, 76,618. And then at the end of that term, a few of those are half-ton pickups that we'd recommend replacing. Sorry, at the end of the 3 years. The equity owned column is for the 11 vehicles that you guys have today at $1,000 a piece. probably conservative with where the resale market's at, but much rather be conservative now and have the reality be a bit better. So the total capital outlay for the year is 65,618. That's just our lease budget less the equity coming back. Maintenance would take a tick down for getting the oldest 11 vehicles out of the fleet and replacing them with brand new ones. Fuel take another improvement. Just again, we're replacing the vehicles with the lowest miles per gallon with brand new ones. So all in, our fleet budget would be 313, or a net cash savings of 106 on the year based on a typical year. Year two, we're going to do the same thing. We have 10 more vehicles to bring in. Could leave you with 37 owned outright that you still have today. 21 on lease, a lease budget of 164, we're up to 21 vehicles. And some of these are police cars and fully outfitted. We'd have, at this point, we'd be getting, assuming $2,000 a piece for the vehicles that we'd sell that year. Again, with where the resale market's at, I don't think it's possible to be that low, but again, we just want to be conservative. So your total capital outlay, lease budget last year, equity be 144. Maintenance take another drop, fuel take another drop. All in, we're at 372 for the year. We have 21 new vehicles. In 24, we bring in another 11, right? So we're shrinking the own column, lease column goes up, lease budget goes up to 267. We have 38 coming back from the 11 vehicles that we sold at $3,500 a piece. We also have our first leases coming back. And this is where things really start to work out. So we have 84,000 coming back from some of our first 11 vehicles we bought, right? Because we're overpaying where we know the resale value will be. The total capital outlay of 144, still under what we typically spend to remain on a 15-year cycle. But we also are now into a pretty substantial maintenance and fuel savings. So all in, we're at a budget of 350. Net cash is still positive. All right, we're going to keep going through the rest of the fleet. We have 22 vehicles to get into at the end of next year. The lease budget will get up to 432. Now we're selling the vehicles, these ones here, for 104 at $6,500 a piece. And again, we're going to start having equity coming back from lease vehicles every single year. So the total capital outlay at this point is 269. Maintenance is almost fixed and budgeted as low as it can be at 48. Fuel again, 127. So we're at a cost from a typical year. The city would have to outlay 25,000 more than an average year. And at the end of 26, this is the last owned vehicles getting sold. So there's 85 grand from these 10 vehicles at $8,500 a piece. Again, all these are conservative. Equity from lease vehicles coming back at 193. Total capital outlay is 221. At this point, we're in totally new vehicles, and we're just going to assume that we can keep maintenance at 34.8 and just do oil changes, essentially. Fuel, again, we're going to assume that we stop making improvements in fuel economy, and we haven't taken inflation into account in this analysis. Our total budget year over year be right about where you guys are at today. At the end of these 10 years, we're at 216, better than just paying cash and running vehicles on a 15-year cycle. This total capital outlay column, that's just taking your lease budget less the equity. So every time we have equity coming back every single year. And in order to make sure that we deliver on this analysis, for every one of our clients, we assign a strategy manager who will come out and meet with the folks of the city and go through every vehicle in the fleet and walk through the math of what the cheapest thing is to do for the city, when to replace them and what vehicles to replace them with, and what the cash impact will be to the city. So all in, yeah, we think we can save at least 216,000 and deal with kind of the lump in the hose that's coming down from 15 years ago when the last round of vehicles was purchased pretty aggressively. So obviously we the on-ramp for the city, obviously there are contracts that would need reviewed. We need to make sure that we're addressing any needs or desires that the council has, make sure our initial vehicle types and specs are all dialed in, and then we order whenever our windows are open. The vehicle shortage just made that a lot harder than it used to be, but it's very doable. It just requires a little bit of planning. And that's what I have. That's the end of the material I plan to go through, but again, I'm here all night, more than happy to answer whatever questions folks have.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember, do you have any questions? You, Mr. Barber.
I guess the first thing I'd like to ask, will this be available for us to review? I did not look on the website, because I always like to see the presentation before I read
This
it.
is on the website right now.
It is on the website, okay. Maintenance schedules. The way I understood it, we will have to send these vehicles out for maintenance.
You guys would have a few options for maintenance. One would be do it exactly as you do it today. The other would be to send the vehicles to the shops in the local tax base in Sunnyside, Les Schwab, all the dealerships, Commercial Tire. There's a handful more I can't see right in front of me.
And is this maintenance schedule more, and you probably couldn't answer this, but I'm sure Shane might be able to, is it more in depth than what we do normally in maintenance, or how is it gonna compare?
I think the maintenance is the same. I mean, we have new vehicles that we acquire now, we maintain. Now, it's less maintenance, but of course, the recurring maintenance is gonna be about 3,000 to 5,000 miles, or how many hours it runs. These vehicles generally do it by the hour because they run all the time. With other fleet vehicles like Public Works and things like that.
Okay. And then just the picture that you showed, I think was all Chrysler vehicles. Can we have our choice of vehicles, or are we pretty much locked into one manufacturer?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, there's no limitations whatsoever on what vehicles we can bring into the fleet. The best way to acquire them is to build them to your specs and order them directly with the manufacturer, which puts us in 100% control. If we're not able to do that, then we're gonna have to pull them from local inventory, which is limiting, but it's not any different with enterprise than it would be on
Okay. And then insurance, are we going to be required to buy different or more insurance than what we carry currently? Because they are a leased vehicle?
Yeah, it's a good question, but no, your insurance that you have today will be sufficient.
And then I have leased cars in the past, and it hasn't been real advantageous for me. I don't think I will go back and do that again. Personally, for me, it's better to buy. And you talked about mileage there. Are we gonna get deducted for miles and hours, or do we have to stay within a parameter?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the lease that you're referring to, where there are mileage limits and penalties and stuff like that, that's called a closed-end lease. And yeah, you're right. It's a pretty bad idea, especially for a city. An open-end lease has no limitations or penalties or anything like that. The reason that's true is because the resale value is property of the city. So if you drive it more, we'll sell it for less, and you'll get less money coming back to you from the resale. If you drive it less and take good care of it, then we'll sell it for more, and the benefit of that goes to you, not to enterprise.
To go back in history, the city tried to do this at one time and we failed miserably. Decimated our equipment rental fund, under a previous city manager. I just have that concern. I can see definite, pluses. We're gonna drive a newer fleet, probably a more dependable fleet. Probably will not have the amount of extra maintenance that we'd have to do with older cars. So this is something that I would want to ponder a little bit. But those are my questions for right now.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farr. Other council members, questions, comments? Mr. Beeler?
Yeah, we've had a very interesting last couple of years, and a lot of these numbers you used in 20 and 21 and the end of 19. I just don't see, 20 and 21, used vehicles went through the roof. People were buying cars and then not even taking them home and selling them for more.
Mm-hmm.
These numbers to debate this over here, I'm kind of worried about that.
Yeah, so that's a valid concern. All the resale forecasts that we've done are not accounting for the spike. We're assuming a normal market, not the market we're in today. The market we're in today continues more than another half year. Then we'll just sell your vehicles for more. That's the only difference. You're right. We can't assume that we're going to be in the market we're in for much longer. I can tell you from Enterprise's shoes, it'll be at least another model year because the manufacturers aren't able to meet the demand again. But if they get back to normal for model year 2024, then the resale market will come back to normal. And yeah, we can't be left holding the bag, which is why all of our projections were assuming a normal market, not the one we're in today.
Other council members? So for myself too, the questions that were asked were very valid questions, and they need to be asked. I like the idea. I'm very much in favor. I know, especially with our police vehicles, but not only the police vehicles, but other vehicles as well, have been driven almost into the ground. We are allowing some of our first responders to drive around in some very risky vehicles. And so I'm in favor of them driving new and more reliable vehicles. And for the city budget, obviously, I really like the idea of less expensive maintenance. An oil change is an awful lot cheaper and easier to handle than a new transmission. However, Mr. Farmer made a very valid point where we have attempted in the past to do something like this, and it did turn out well for the city. And I think that as council, it would behoove us to look at this very, very carefully. I have not had a chance yet to look at what's on the city website, and I'm sitting 20 feet away from the screen, so I had a hard time reading some of the numbers that you had up. So I'm going to want to go over those and read those very carefully, and may want to come back to the city manager or other members of the city with some questions. And I think that would be wise for all of us to do. You know, on the surface, the idea is one that sounds really good, but you know, I've not been on council too many years. I've seen a lot of things that sounded really good on the surface, and the implementation didn't go as anticipated. So I think we need to do some studying and maybe even get back to you with more questions. But you know, that's not throwing it out the window, but it's certainly, you know, giving us an opportunity to ask some questions. So, council members, any further questions? Yes, Ms. Hart.
Yes, thank you. I think the question I have is, you know, it comes back to the maintenance and the regular maintenance on each of the vehicles. And that would probably be either set up according to how many hours it's been on the road. I think that's what I heard you say, or how many hours or miles were the two criteria before they would be maintained for oil changes, tire changes, that sort of thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's actually the data from the fleet will flow through to the enterprise website, which will generate reminders and reports that will say which vehicles are due for service in the next 30 days, which ones are due now, and which are overdue.
And I didn't quite understand, I think Mr. Farmer asked whether or not this would be within our own shop or somebody else's shop, that this kind of maintenance would be taken care of. Would it be our shop, the city shop, or would that be through a different shop?
Yeah, there's a few ways, a few options that the city would have. One would be to continue using your shop today and just really make no changes other than fewer transmissions and more just the routine preventive maintenance like oil changes. So you'd still do all the work, just the nature of the work would lighten a little bit. If the city shop is overburdened and there aren't enough mechanics and too many vehicles and too much work that needs done, then yeah, you would have the option to take some of the vehicles to the shops in Sunnyside and have the tax base do them. I don't know what the best move for you guys would be, but either of those options or a combination are available.
Mr. Farmer?
Yeah, it's just something that just popped in my mind. This is more for our staff. Have our techs had a chance to look at the program to know what they are going to be required to do and do they have the facility to do it? I think before we start doing this, I think we need to find out if our shop and our techs are ready to do something like this.
Yeah, our techs they're certified ASC guys, so they know what they're doing. Our shop is set up to do maintenance on the new vehicles we've heard now. So, and like, kind of what, Julie was talking about, and Joe, is that basically if we get overwhelmed in the shop with too much preventative maintenance stuff coming in, we have a broken tie rod or something on an axle on a vehicle, we would send that out to get, we currently do that now. Not so too backlogged on PM stuff. So that's currently how we operate, and the plan for this program was to keep that all in-house. We do have 2 mechanics now, and they're doing a great job. So we haven't sat down with them to answer your question, Mr. Farmer, but we certainly will.
One thing I wanted to clarify, that all makes complete sense to me, and if it's a good system, I don't know that I'd recommend changing anything. But because the equity is property of the city, and they're your vehicles, unlike a traditional lease, there are no requirements from enterprise on how often you service them, what services you do or don't do. They're your vehicles in the same way they would be if you purchase cash in that regard.
If I may say something.
Yeah, there's all.
One thing that I would also like to kind of put out there for you guys, we currently are losing catalytic converters at a rate of at least once a month for the trucks that are parked in City Hall, and then also people have broken into the shop. We know that some of the other measures we're going to be taking with cameras should start to help that, but that is an issue. And then also we've had gas tanks punched. Newer vehicles you could still do that with, but they are a little bit, well, they're newer. They're have different kinds of gas tanks than what the older trucks do. So that's what I would like to just remind council, that we're replacing stuff and it's going to make it safer for us and cost less. Catalytic converters, $400 right now. Right.
It depends on the vehicle. Some of them are up to about $2,000.
So that's another issue that we face daily in our city, that this is something, and they know our vehicles have them and that we have to replace them. So they're doing this regularly, and I think it's a big deal for us to be able to have a vehicle that doesn't have a catalytic converter, especially when you have people that need to get around.
So I usually have a couple of concerns. You know, traditionally with the lease program, you know, there's some negatives, downsides to it. And of course, we're talking about that, the lease that you mentioned, you call it a closed-end lease. But, you know, the downside is you don't own the vehicle. You know, when you're done, you don't own it. You have the option of buying it at the end, but, and I don't know if that's how this works. But as a city, we do have the responsibility to guard our finances and be careful. So we have to really double check what we are obligating ourselves to. For example, how much flexibility is there? What if we have an economic downturn in our city and all of a sudden finances are tight and we've got an awful lot of obligation to lease vehicles? How's that gonna work out? Are we gonna be able to be flexible and make adjustments on that? And, you know, that kind of ties in, you know, guarantee, you know, you have these projections now for the next 5 years. We saw that on the graph, but yeah, okay. And, you know, in your favor, you were being somewhat conservative and all that, but if prices continue to go crazy the way they have over the last 2 years, are we locked in at a price? Are we gonna have those kinds of savings? Or is all those savings gonna disappear if things go nuts one way or the other?
Yeah, again, good questions. And I do want to say that I appreciate a healthy skepticism, and that's what I would do if I were in your shoes, without a doubt. The plan that we laid out is by no means a commitment. It's our plan, our roadmap that we foresee. But it's not a set it and forget it approach. We need to come out and meet with you guys. If 2009 happens again, for example, we're not going to tell you to replace anything because the resale market's terrible. If 2020 happens again, we'll probably recommend replacing a little bit more than we had planned on, because that's the cheapest thing to do. Yeah, and as far as the leases and obligations and flexibility, the equity in the vehicles is always property of the city. And you're always able to extend or shorten a lease. There's no scenario where you're forced to do anything. And you're always free to pay off the balance of the lease and just own the vehicle outright. And at that point, it should become a finance. Or a few months of a finance followed by a cash purchase if you do it that quickly. And you know, here's an example we're doing for a private client. I just had this conversation this morning. They had a high interest loan that they wanted to free up some cash. They had a couple $1 million in equity in their fleet, right? Meaning total resale value of their fleet as it stands today compared to the balance owed on their fleet. You know, we're generally able to restructure the leases and free up that cash for them because at the end of the day, it's theirs. So yeah, if things were to go pretty south and we didn't want to have much of a lease obligation, yeah, we're willing to help be flexible and figure it out, and do whatever we can. At the end of the day, we want you guys to succeed. That's how we succeed. Yeah, we have to. We don't have a choice.
All right, thanks, sir. And I appreciate your presentation. It was a lot of information. Like I said, we all need to absorb this, study this, and make ourselves a little bit more knowledgeable on the question. So I do appreciate all the information you gave and all the graphs and everything. So yeah, we'll take some time to study that. Ms. Olive, do you have anything that you want to add to this or any of your staff?
I would just like to say that, how I was introduced to this program was at the City Managers Conference, and I didn't want to go talk to Enterprise because they were gonna try to hard sell me. At least that's what I thought. So I found another city manager that has the same program. I snuck one of their flyers, and I looked on there and found City of Sullivan. And then I sat down with him before I ever approached Enterprise. And I said, give me the scoop on this program and tell me what it's done for your city. And he said we were 15-year-old cars, having a lot of maintenance problems with them, giving out great gas mileage, and they had done the same thing that the city of Sunnyside had done, purchased a fleet and then had all these old cars. He said that within 2 years, they were able to replace their fleet because the price of vehicles last year went up. And he said that they were astronomically great to work with, and not to be afraid to go over and talk to them, that they weren't gonna hard sell me, that they want to do this and they run this. It's how they make money in their business world. And really, their model is something that at any time, like he said, if you don't feel like you want to replace cars this year, you can wait and do it the next year. So it's flexible in the way you do things. And if you find that you've got this great equity in a vehicle that's only a year old, and that's what they did in Fulton. They purchased in 2019, and they sold them in 2020 because they were worth so much money. And that's how they were able to get their fleet replaced so much faster. And he told me, he said, if you have any questions, I can go up there and we can go drive around in his trucks. We can, talk to the accountant up there, talk to their finance people. But he said the other thing that was very beneficial is how much you're gonna pay every year. For budgeting, this is how much I have for this year's budget. And that made it huge for him as well, because they had budgets that went over time that he didn't always know, okay, can we afford 2 cars this year? Do I have to get a loan for 4 cars? Do we, all of those things. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, so that, I did really kind of vet this before I brought it even back to staff. And I would be willing to talk to him and see if you guys, want to talk to him about the program. He's very much,
This is the city manager.
City of Fulton, yes. Jason?
I just had a couple things. I spoke with Joe quite a bit this week, going over these and some of the numbers, and I just had a couple of details I wanted to give you. So the 4 police vehicles that we bought this year came in at around $260,000. And if you look at like the average of the last 5 years on this plan that he put out, when you look at it, the second to the last page when you have it in front of you, once we have all the vehicles replaced, they show our lease amount on an annual basis. It looks like on here that it's $500,000, but because of the equity, the amount that you're actually paying out in capital averages over the last 5 years at $267,000. So that's very comparable to what we just paid this year for only 4 new cars, but in order to support an entire fleet that's updated. So that sounds almost too good to be true on the surface, and it sort of made me a little uncomfortable, but I mean, it does make sense, and I totally understand, Mr. Farmer, when you say, leasing was not for me. I'm not the kind of person that needs a new car every year, but I know people who do get a new car every year, and they lease, and that's how they do it, and they have no problem with it, and I think that this is kind of that, bringing it on a bigger level of, it doesn't cost you more money if you're turning your fleet over more regularly than it would to buy a car outright. And that, just looking at that number of the cost of the 4 cars compared to how much our capital outlay would be in 10 years, and seeing that it's right now relatively the same amount, okay, I kind of see how this works. And then the other thing I wanted to point out to you that Joe and I talked about, but he didn't mention much of in this presentation, was the purchasing windows that they get. And I'm hoping, Joe, maybe you can talk about this a little bit. The benefit of working with a large purchaser like this is the ability to get the vehicles. The 4 police vehicles that we ordered this year, we ordered them in October, and we did not get them until the end of April. So it took us 6 months just to get 4 police vehicles. So if we have a plan in place like this, and we're working with them on a regular basis, and they know a year out how many vehicles we need to purchase, when those windows open that are very competitive, and I'll give Joe an opportunity to tell you what happened with this current window, we can get those vehicles when they're available from the manufacturers. What was the one you said was only open for 26 hours or something?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, GM pickups this year. So prior to COVID, most vehicle types you could order 10 months out of the year. You could stack up every manufacturer and take your time and make a really educated decision. And GM was really the first manufacturer to open up for pickups this year, which is kind of the canary in the coal mine. On May 26th, they opened ordering for all their 1/2 tons, 3/4 tons, and 1 ton pickups, and they sold out in 2 hours into the following morning. So 26 hours later, they've received 120,000 orders, and that's all they can make this year. Everything else will be retail. And the difference between, ordering from the factory with a government discount compared to outbidding people on a lot at retail is $5,000 to $25,000 different, to be avoided at all costs.
And so if by being a member of a purchasing cooperative like this, it's us in the playing field for these big orders that come direct from the factory that we would probably not ever have access to. Being able to order exactly what we need in a 26-hour window. That scared me when he talked to me about that, about the availability to get vehicles as we need them. And it seems to me that in talking with staff and looking at our previous fleet plan, the plan was somewhat non-existent from back a few years ago when you did have a plan, but then, it fell apart and it's kind of not really been a plan since then. And I think that could put us at danger of not being able to get vehicles with the current plan. That's all I had to add.
All right, well, thank you everybody for your input. If there is no other comments or discussion on this item. All right, item number 2.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Joe.
Upcoming council meetings, Madam City Manager.
So we have, Monday, June 13th. So we will, have the oath of office for Esteban Reyes, the Planning Commission. Seed application projects came, and we're still waiting to get some more information back on that one. Sunnyside School District water line easement, I believe we're gonna move that to the next meeting, correction? Transfer building agreement, that one is ready, that's the Choices building in the parking lot here. We're gonna have a public hearing on the 6-year kit, and then 6-year kit adoption. And then if you would like, we can bring the vehicle, enterprise vehicle program back. And then an update to the classification and compensation schedule.
Council, in light of what we saw this evening, would you like to continue this discussion and bring it back? Would you be thinking that we would have full vote on this item?
I think we would need to know whether we should move forward with it or we should just abandon everything else with it. I mean, that's really kind of where we need to know if because there's contracts, there's just more stuff to this program that we need to go over.
Understood. So council members, do you think you'll have time to review the paperwork between now and next week, Monday?
I think I'll need more time personally.
I'm pretty sure I could review it before our next council meeting.
I think I could review it, but I would like to see a couple of review meetings. I talk about it, because I think we probably could talk about some other things that are gonna be brought up. I think we might need to think and talk about those. So I would hate to have any kind of adoption on that meeting, but I would welcome conversation.
So why don't we continue with that? Leave it on the agenda, but we will talk about it. And hopefully you will at least have had a chance to review most of what's on the website, if not all of it. And we can hold an intelligent conversation on that, and then perhaps bring it back at the end of the month at our second meeting with the hopes of adopting it. I know there's an awful lot that you have to go through, making the arrangements and getting that done. So we'll try not to make it take any longer than necessary. But I do really want council to study this and to be able to get any questions they may have answered. I've seen a couple instances where I myself have been guilty of this too, where I did not have a full grasp of the situation that I thought I did. And we ended up not getting the best deal in the world. And so I want to make sure that we all have the opportunity to get this right. And I do appreciate the work that you as staff have done on this. You did have good answers to the questions, and you even answered questions we didn't know to ask yet. So appreciate that.
And then on, 21st of June, the community forum will be at City Hall from 4:30 to 6:30. And again, this will be the same style just at a different location and in the evening. And then, the next meeting for June 27th, we have the Friends of Port Water Main Improvement Contract.
Excellent. Council members, if you have anything that you wish to have added to the agenda, please see either myself or the city manager, and we will get those items added.
I just had a couple of quick questions. I'm sorry. I just had a couple of quick questions, even though there's not a place on the agenda for that. But I just wanted to note that the reason I was late this evening was because I was meeting with the Destination Sunnyside. And it's advertising for starting up the farmers market later this month, Friday night. I think it's following on it, right? It's not coming on the 13th, but the following, council meeting somewhere in that area. So we're jazzing up for that, so that's why I was late this evening, so.
Excellent. Yeah, I knew that you would give me a heads up on that, so I appreciate it. All right, there being no other business to come before us this evening, and without objection, meeting is adjourned at 7:30 and 7:31. So,
What do they say, peace and harmony, that's what the council, the port commissioner
is that right?
says.
All right, thank you, everybody. Good night.